Welcome to the Strategy Sherpa Show, a series of organic discussions between hosts David Chavez and a variety of notable business leaders centered around their most significant failures and how they handled those challenges, so listeners can learn from their most teachable moments and apply the lessons to their organizations. Now, here's your host, David Chavez.
Hey everyone, this is David Chavez. It's a Strategy Sherpa show, and I have a couple of special guests for you today. They've been on the show before. They're a couple of guys I work with, and I am honored to introduce both of them. Ted, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Very good. You get what you asked for, right? Say hello to everybody. I got a hello. All right, Ted, tell everybody a little bit about you this morning.
Yeah, good morning, David. Thanks for having me. I'm Ted Sarvata. I live outside of Portland, Oregon, on the Washington side of the Columbia River, and I'm married and have 2 teenage kids. And I have been a coach for 14 years and super excited to be on the show this morning.
All right, great, Ted. Glad to have you. And Ted and I have been working together for quite a while now, so it's an honor to have him on here. And we're going to be talking about some of the clients that we work with. And Warren, introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Warren Sager. I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, soon to be relocating to Dallas, Texas area. And I've been a serial entrepreneur for most of my life. I built, scaled, and sold 7 different businesses over my career. And a few years ago, I sold my companies and decided to help other entrepreneurs and leaders grow their businesses and hopefully learn from some of the mistakes that I've learned and not make them as well.
All right, very good. We're all trying to do that. I know I'm even trying to do that, but just a little update on some of the events that we have. AssuredStrategy.com is the website, and all of us are members of Assured Strategy. And on the 28th of this month, we will have a scaling up workshop and in Austin, Texas. And if you're interested in that, you can get online and check that out. It's a full day workshop, and we'll be covering scaling up. So all the essentials, people, strategy, execution, and cash. And then on April the 4th, Mr. Warren Sager, who is on the line with us, will be doing Improve Your Cash Position with 7 Simple Key Financial Levers. And Warren, give a little insight to what's going to happen there.
Yeah, well, it's a great webinar. It's something I'm really passionate about because my first business actually closed down because I ran out of cash. So we're just going to talk about the 7 main levers that CEOs and leadership teams can use to help improve their cash position and their profitability.
Okay, very good. Okay, so you're going to help people out with an issue you actually had at one time.
Yes, that is correct. I'm going to talk about that today, a little bit of my experience and then one of my clients.
All right, very good. All right, so on May the 8th, Ted, what's happening in Portland on May the 8th?
Scaling Up Workshop in Portland.
Oh, yeah.
Strategy, execution, and cash.
All right, so you and I are going to do that together.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one. Should be a great
Yeah,
day.
me too. Well, it'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to do the Austin one with a new member of our team, Michelle. She's going to be coming in from Boston, and she's going to be doing that workshop with me. And so we have quite a few people. We only have a few seats left. So if you're interested, March 28th, it's a small venue. So we had to keep it small because we had a little issue with the hotel. And so I just want to make sure everybody knows the dates on those. All right, guys, let's get started. So what we do here on the Strategy Sherpa show is we talk about failures, talk about our own failures, talk about, and if I have coaches on, we talk about some of the clients we work with and some of their failures and some of the things we seen while we were working with them, or why, or when we were after we worked with them or before we worked with them, and then how we helped them. So let's start off. Who wants to go first?
I'm ready.
All right, I'll go first. I'm ready.
All right, both of you are ready. All right. So Warren, since you sent me yours first, let's do one of yours first, and then we'll go to Ted.
All right. Well, I mean, I kind of teed it up in the intro too. So I'm doing a webinar coming up about cash flow. And it's near and dear to my heart. So I want to quickly tell you my story or my failure and what I learned from it. And then about one of the clients I'm working with and what I did with them. So my first business was a mattress factory, and the details about what we did doesn't matter. But what matters is that as a young entrepreneur, what I wanted to do is I wanted to grow, sell, top line revenue. Hey, how much business can I do? And I was so focused on that exclusively. And then I did that. And what happened was I grew myself right out of business. I was not aware of the capital I needed for inventory. And the more I sold, the more I realized I needed more inventory to sell. And eventually, by the time I realized what had happened, it was kind of too late, and I had literally gone broke. So that was something really important that I learned. And in my next business, I solved it by not having.
Wait, just a second. So you don't, let's not lump all of them into one. So on that first business, you literally grew yourself out of cash.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's real simple. When you need to sell one thing, you need to have, let's say, 2 in stock to sell one. Well, then when you sell 2, then you need 3. And then you sell 3, you need 5. And you need more cash than the business had to support the inventory to support the sales.
Okay. And so this is a common problem, everybody out there. As a CPA, I've seen this happen many, many times, and you usually get the people in your office when they're already broke. And so it's a little too late, and it's hard for us to help. But Warren, explain to what happened. So you're buying inventory so that you can make more sales. You're making more sales, which is causing you to have to buy more inventory and keep more on hand.
Yeah, and over time, the time it took me to get the dollars back from selling them was longer than the amount of time I had to buy the inventory, and that's where I ran short.
Right. So we call that the cash conversion cycle, and more small businesses go out of business from not having enough cash, and they run out of cash literally. And that's from too much opportunity. So you had a lot of opportunity going on.
Yeah, it was so frustrating. I was part of a big buying group, and that year I actually had record sales, and I won all the awards for growth and sales in that organization. And then the next year I wasn't there anymore. So quite humiliating a little bit, because I was focused on one thing and one thing only.
Yeah, but I mean, you've been a coach for a couple years now. Haven't you seen this already in some of the clients?
Yeah, so that was one of the other stories I wanted to tell. So I'm working with a client right now, and they were actually 22. COVID was good for them. They had some really good years. Cash was good, profitability was great. And so they said, hey, we need to, keep leveraging this and let's grow. So they decided to put a plan together to hire some more people, invest in more inventory, and let's make it happen. So they spent a lot of cash. It was a deliberate amount of cash they were going to spend. And then the plan was that would come back to them with the increased revenue and profitability with that revenue. So that was the plan. It didn't work. They were spending, but the growth didn't come. And so all of a sudden they're looking around and going, holy crap, we just burned through most of the cash we had. And now we're worried about, what's going to happen. So luckily they did realize that. They realized it sooner than later, which was really good. It's like, okay, so what do we do? Well, we have this great tool called the Power of One, which helps CEOs and their leadership teams kind of look through what they have control over and what they can do to affect cash flow and profitability. Things like raising prices, selling more, reducing your COGS, stuff like that. And so we went through this exercise looking as a team, what can we affect? Like, how can we kind of turn things back around and increase the cash and profitability? So that's the exercise we went through. And they focused on 2 things. They decided to raise prices, and they decided to reduce inventory. And then, of course, they were going to look at, maintaining expenses, tweaking where they could, little things like that. Their expenses wasn't a huge problem, but, you always got to, look at tightening up your expenses when you're trying to, run an efficient business. Yep. So that's what they did. So fast forward 90 days, it was only 90 days. And we look at the P&L and balance sheet, and holy crap, they increased their cash position by almost $500,000. And the profitability was up too. They had not increased their revenue. The sales had not still grown, but because of what they did with their prices being raised and the inventory being lowered, they added almost $500,000 worth of cash. The
Oh,
other
great.
thing that, yeah, and the other thing that happened was really surprising is that their gross margin increased by 6%. And now they'd only raised their prices by 2%. So they're still trying to dig in and figure out, but what the big takeaway was, when you really start thinking about, making some changes in what you control, sometimes even other good things happen from just being more disciplined and focused on your numbers.
Yeah, I like that you're saying that. I would also say that a lot of people, when they start cutting things, they cut so deeply that they end up hurting themselves even more into the future. And so you have to be careful. I think that when you're cutting, you have to do it methodically. And if you're going to lay people off, which that does happens from time to time with companies, when you lay people off, do one round. I've seen people die from 1,000 rounds of layoffs.
Yeah.
And, I know it's not 1,000, but even 3 or 4 really kills the company culture all the way around. I mean, your culture is already damaged after laying people off. So you see that quite a bit. Warren, so you helped them pull some of the levers, and then their cash came back in a pretty strong way then.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you talk about, laying off people. I want to mention that we said that they raised prices and they cut their inventory. They did not affect any people. They did not make any cuts because they knew they still wanted to grow, right? Like that's still part of the plan. They just have to, take a little bit more time, and they needed the cash, the lifeblood of the organization, to be able to make sure they had the time to do it. And so they did not lay off any people, and they weren't planning on it. It was only about things that, helped affect cash flow without affecting the growth of the company long term.
Oh wow. So you pulled those levers, and when they looked at that and they raised prices 2%, that really increased their profitability. That 2% probably came down to their bottom line plus a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And so, obviously raising prices is a little dicey. There's sometimes your products or your services are a little price sensitive in the market, so you got to be careful. But if you can raise prices and it doesn't affect your customers buying from you, that goes all the way directly to the bottom line. And there's no change in your business. You don't have to sell, if you try to increase revenue, you have to do more, and there's more cost and more effort to do it. Raising prices doesn't change the business other than getting the increased price and revenue to the bottom line, as long as it doesn't affect customers buying. And
Yeah,
so
oh, go ahead.
yeah, so the tool we use, this Power of One, it's a way to kind of analyze these numbers, because let's say you raise prices by 5% and you have no change in business. That means that's 5% to the bottom line. Awesome. But what if you raise prices 5% and all of a sudden things, you lost 20% of your business? Well, obviously you run those numbers and you could see, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And figure out what makes sense for the business and for your customers.
Yeah, it's interesting that their margin went up 6%, but they only raised prices 2%. And my guess is that there's probably a little bit of efficiency that they started to pay attention to that they weren't paying attention to when everything was going really well. And I talk about this quite a bit, about complacency settling into companies, and they probably got rid of some of the complacency. What do you think?
Yeah, I think your gut is probably right. And I hope over time they'll see that as well and figure out that, what they did had a bigger impact than what they realized.
Yeah, and I talk about it from the Good to Great book, because Jim Collins talks about it as having healthy paranoia. And I want to make sure I stay a little bit paranoid, and especially when the company's doing well, because oftentimes we take our foot off the gas and we're not paying attention as well as we are when things aren't going that well. And so we end up starting to waste a lot of things.
Well said. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So very interesting. Well, we're going to take a break and then we'll come back. And Ted, why don't we hit you up next for share one of your stories that you have?
Awesome.
All right. So this is the Strategy Sherpa Show. Don't forget, Austin, on the 28th of this month, if you're interested, assuredstrategy.com. This is the Strategy Sherpa Show. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to the Strategy Sherpa Show with David Chavez. Have a question for David or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show.
Hey, everyone. This is David Chavez. This is the Strategy Sherpa Show, and I have my partners Ted and Warren with me today, and we're talking a little bit about some of our clients and some of the things that have come up in their worlds and how we've helped them through it. And Ted, it's Warren got to go first just because he texted me earlier this morning. So you're up, and I think I remember this client, and it's been a while, but it's a really good example. It's a marketing company that you are talking about.
Yeah. I want to talk about fear, because often we talk about differentiation, right? Assured strategy. What is your strategy? We need to differentiate. We need to be different from everybody else. And so I was working with this client, and they knew that they needed to differentiate, but they couldn't figure out how. And the reason was because they were afraid of saying no to anybody, which are really two different issues, but they couldn't see it. They wanted to be able to use their process. They had a process, right? They had an intake process. They could figure out, well, can we help you? What kinds of things can we do for you? Are we going to do advertising for you? Or are we going to do branding for you? Are we going to do lead generation for you? They could kind of do a lot of different things. They didn't want to specialize in one area because they didn't want to give up a full service kind of idea. And they didn't want to focus in one industry because they didn't want to give up clients that were coming from other industries. So they had a long history. This business was decades old, and they were generalists. So it was super hard for them to think about how do they actually differentiate. What was really different about them was, well, not too much. They kind of looked like all the other marketing companies. Now, they had a really good reputation, and they had been successful over the years. And, the fear, though, is the thing that just kept them stuck. And so I think it was 3 years running, every time we came to their annual meeting, they were committed. We're going to figure out some differentiation this year. And they came into an annual meeting, and they had a niche. An industry niche, not just an industry, but a sub niche. And I don't want to talk about which one it is for confidentiality. Okay. It's really important for us not to divulge details. But they came into that meeting, and we talked about, all right, what would it mean if you were to be a specialist in that niche? And of course, what was the first thing that happened? They all got really scared.
That F word kills you.
Yeah, because they didn't want to give up business. They didn't want people call them and say, hey, can you help me? And they didn't want to feel like they had to say no. And so we talked a lot about that. Having a niche doesn't mean you have to say no. That was the first hurdle that we had to get over. Those are two different issues. Where do you want to put your focus versus when the phone rings, what do you say to the person on the other end? Yeah. So that was the first decision that they had to make. Oh, wait a minute. You're saying we can say yes to whoever we want to say yes to if they call us. Yes. Yes.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that was a big deal for them, to get over that little hurdle. So that's one thing I want everybody to think about. You have to free up your mind, because sometimes your mind will play tricks on you and makes a decision mean a whole bunch of other things that it doesn't mean.
Yeah. And elaborate on that just a little bit more to help people understand that just a little bit better.
Our minds work in patterns. And for them, the pattern was, if we focus in one area, it means we can't work in others. So that's just an example. Their mind was playing a trick on them. That's right. They didn't understand, their minds didn't understand that they could choose day to day, what are my activities today? And their activities could all be in the niche versus, oh, the phone rings, I have an opportunity, I could say yes to that. So our minds do that to us all the time. I mean, it's hard for me to remember other examples, but it happens.
Well, we had it just recently in a retreat we were in together. We were talking about the different quadrants, Covey's time matrix, and we were talking about urgent and important, the whirlwind, taking you away from the important but not so urgent, right? So
Right.
it's working on the company instead of in the company. How do I get more time on working on the things to solve the larger problems? When reoccurring problems are happening over and over again, how do I solve those problems? But back to your thing about the marketing and the fear. So I think a lot of people, when they're starting to do strategy work, they don't understand that they have to put the strategy into their business model. And when it comes to putting it into their business model, that fear is real. I mean, because, and one of my favorite quotes is, strategy is not a lengthy action plan. It's an evolution of a central idea through continually changing circumstances. That's from Jack Welch. And I had shortened that up at one point. Don't fall in love with your path, fall in love with your destination. And what that really means to me is that a lot of people get clarity on where they want to take their company, what they're trying to do. But one of the things they fail to do is implement it into their business model. So they're not really delivering on the strategy the way they think they are, because they've fallen in love with their business model. And I think that Blockbuster would tell you that that's not a real good way to run your business, right? They had fallen in love with their business model because of the late fees on movies. They
Right.
failed to convert over to the digital side, and it really cost them their whole business. I think there's one Blockbuster left, I think in Chicago somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the city, but I think it's Chicago. And it's just comical because of what you're talking about right there.
Yeah. So you get stuck in your current way of thinking, and it's hard to see beyond it.
Yeah.
So the next thing that they ran into, as soon as they got over the idea that they could answer the phone and say yes to whatever they wanted. We weren't trying to limit them in that moment. But the next immediate fear that they had was, well, if we have to do all of our outreach, in this niche, then nobody even really knows us in that niche. We've had one good client in that niche, but we've been generalists. And so their minds made it seem like we have to make this shift immediately this year. Like by the end of this year, we have to somehow be specialists in this new industry. And so we worked a lot again on their minds on the fact that you can make this plan longer.
Right.
At Assured Strategy, we usually think in 3 year, sort of 3 years out, where do you need to be? But as they thought about that, there was just too much fear. And so they thought about 4 years, and there was too much fear. And they thought about 5 years, and it was too much fear. They made a 6-year plan. They're the only client I've ever worked with that had that time frame that was so long. On the one-page strategic plan from Scaling Up, it says 3 to 5 years. We counsel our clients, mostly it's 3 years for almost everybody.
Right.
But for them, they chose 6 years. And I was like, okay, well, that seems like a really long time to me, but it's your business. It's not my business. And if that's going to get you over the fear and get you started, I'd much rather have you on the path. We don't wait for all the traffic lights to turn green before we leave our house to drive across town. We leave the house knowing where we're going, and the light turns red and we stop and we wait and then we go. And so that's what they did. They really had to think about, what does it mean to make this plan? Okay, now it's 6 years out, their fear started to get less. 6 years, oh, that's kind of a long time. Oh, and they started to breathe, and they started to be able to open up their minds to what does it really mean? And then we could focus on, all right, so now that we've got that, let's zoom in. What do we need to do this year?
Right.
And then it became really clear. Oh, well, we need to take that one client we have in that niche, and we need to do an in-depth case study on them. And we need to start going to trade shows in that industry. We need to just start going. We're not selling anything. We're not changing our model. They're generalists. So anybody that came to them, they could just take a new client, even if it was in that industry, and they could do their normal process. But now they were starting to think about, wait a minute, when we do this process again next year and the year after, we're going to start to become specialists in this industry. Our process is probably going to change. So now their minds were looking for those places where they could go deeper. Because being generalists, you can do a lot of good work, but being steeped in an industry means they have, they can specialize their process and make it more relevant specifically to that industry. And that's what they started to look for in the first year. they didn't really get there that first year, but that's what they were thinking about. And getting over the fear was a big deal.
Yeah, most definitely. I think when it comes to the business model, a lot of people really get afraid of switching it. And I would also tell people not to flick a switch and change your business model. I think it should be done over a little bit of time. But at the same, the smaller the company, the easier it is to make that switch. But you have to just remember, I've seen people flick that switch and change their business model, and them almost go out of business from that because of revenue generation takes a little bit of time to switch over. So their fear is real. There is a chance that they could hurt themselves. 6 years seems like awful long time. Warren, what do you think about 6 years?
Yeah, well, Ted, as you were committing to that or allowing them to commit to it, I assume you figured, well, they would say it, but once we got the ball rolling, it obviously would probably be closer to 3, but you just had to get them to that point.
That was certainly my plan, and I did counsel
Yeah.
them on a shorter time frame. But I just think it's a good example. It's not my decision, and so if I can get them to make the decision, and David, it was a big deal. A dimmer switch instead of a light switch. Instead of flipping a switch, it's a dimmer switch. And for them, that was what was really important. They were able to make a small change, and their business didn't look significantly different a year into that than it did at the beginning. That was totally normal, and it makes sense because they're doing things gradually, but their minds had been completely changed, and that was the big difference. From the outside, it was hard to see that anything had changed at all.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I love how you're talking about this because I think a lot of people really have a hard time with this. It's not as easy as they think it is. And I love how you talked about the patterns and how they were stuck in their patterns. And then that fear to come out of it was very strong. And 6 years is an awful long time. But if that helped them start to shift their mind, it was good to have that plan, because 6 years could go by and they're still stuck in wherever they're at as a business. So that's great.
Yeah, and that's what they didn't want to do. They didn't want to stay stuck. They'd already been stuck and in this thought process for at least 3 years, where it was really important to them to find their specialty, and they were just so stuck that was like, okay, whatever we have to do to get unstuck, we're going to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting close to taking another break. So, Warren, did you have anything to add to Ted's thing?
No, I don't. But that's a fascinating story, and fear is what drives a lot of people's behavior. So if you could kind of overcome your fear, good things can happen.
Yeah, I talk about it quite a bit in retreats. Ted and I have been in a couple of retreats together lately. And Ted, I love calling it the F word because it is a 4-letter F word, and it does mess you up more than anything else. Whenever I'm not doing something, I always try to dig inside of myself and ask myself what my fear is. So, yeah. And it's really alive. No matter how assertive of an entrepreneur I think I am, I still have fear. It's amazing. Yep. All right, we're going to take a break, guys. And don't forget, Warren's workshop is on April the 4th from 1 to 2 p.m.
Webinar.
Central. Webinar. I'm sorry. Webinar from 1 to 2 p.m. on April the 4th. And it's about cash. He's going to try to help you increase your cash flow. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. This is the Strategy Sherpa Show.
Welcome back to the Strategy Sherpa Show with David Chavez. Have a question for David or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show.
Hey, this is David Chavez. This is Strategy Sherpa Show. I have Ted Sarvata and Warren Sager with us, and we are talking about the F word, which is fear, right before the break there. And then Warren was talking a little earlier about cash, the one thing that all of us want more of, but sometimes it seems to float away from our company before we realize it. Ted, thank you for sharing on that last segment. It was really good. And that fear thing just bites us all at times. So, and stops us from doing the things we know we need to be doing. And Warren, let's talk to you, come back to you. And I think you have another short story to share with us.
Yeah, I sure do. And it's around this whole idea of accountability. So here's the story. We've got a sales team within an organization, and they're working hard, doing an okay job, but ultimately they're not hitting their numbers or getting the results that they're looking for. And effort is great, but it's also important to get the results. So what was affecting the ability to get the results when we start digging in? There was really a lack of accountability. So, and boy, that is such an overarching theme through all the teams we work with and any company I've ever been a part of, right, David? I'm sure you talk about that all the time.
Yeah, I would probably say it's the number one issue CEOs talk to me about. And it's probably the number one issue that CEOs talk to both of you about also.
Yeah.
And it definitely is our number one issue when we go into companies and start to help them make some changes.
Right. The CEO said, "Man, if I could just get everyone to do what they're supposed to do, everything would be great." So that's all right. So here's what we did here. So we started digging in, fair. Okay, so why is there not the accountability or the results? What was accountability? So a couple of things came to light. So first of all, we started looking at, did everyone on the team know exactly what the expectation was? No. Well, okay, let's start right there. So we create what's called a job scorecard, which gives some clarity around the role and what the expectations are, and the overarching goals and what things they need to focus on, but then also the specific measurable metrics and KPIs to determine if they're being successful or not. So they created that. Great. They gave it to everyone. Great. Then what? Well, nothing really happened. Well, because you can't just create it and say, "Oh, that's it. There you go. You know what you need to do." So we had to take it to the next level. So a couple of things. One was this whole idea of going over it on a regular basis. And how do you do that? Well, we created these one-on-ones. It's a weekly rhythm of meeting one-on-one with everyone on the team and their leader to discuss. How you doing? Let's go over the plan. Where you stuck? What's the challenge? Is there something I can do to help you be successful? Hey, if you're on track, let's celebrate. If you're off track, let's talk about what we need to do differently. Looking at the inputs, the small things that you have to do every day towards those results. And we started, doing that. And it started having an impact.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Keep
you
going.
go ahead, David.
No,
Go
no.
ahead, then I'm going to move on.
Well, I think, like inside of companies, 80% of the problems are communication problems, right? And what you just talked about was accountability, and you talked about the leader having a meeting with each of their people and go over where they're at for the week. And we talked to so many leaders, and it's so interesting because they don't want to do those 30-minute meetings, but then they complain about the communication in the company really sucks.
Yeah.
And the accountability is just not there.
Yeah. I mean, what better ways to use your time as a leader than to spend time with your people and make sure they're good and have what they need to get the job done?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how they complain about it when we even suggest it. A lot of times we get a lot of pushback. I usually get a lot of pushback. It usually takes some kind of issue or something to have them really start to do it on a regular basis.
Well, we talked about this idea of one-on-ones with this team or this leadership team for almost a year before they actually started it. And then, like a lot of things, once they do it, they go, "Oh man, we should have started this sooner." It's like, well, yeah, we told you, but you had to come to it on your own way.
Yep. And a lot of times, and that's I think the difference between a coach and a consultant. A consultant would come in and start having the meetings for you, and as a coach, we're going to encourage you to have the meetings because you're the one who can really influence the outcomes. Me as a consultant, I can't influence your teams and the outcomes. But back to your accountability, you had something else you wanted to share.
Yeah. So, okay, so that was very specific to those people and their one-on-ones. But then we realized there was still something else missing in communication, which was the team didn't have real vision or clarity or alignment to what the whole company was doing. So there's another tool we use called the vision summary, which allows team members to understand the big picture. So it starts like with the the culture of the company, its core values, its purpose, its BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, its big goal that they're working towards. So we needed to share that with them so they understood a little bit more of the context of the big picture and the why behind their job and why those measurements or why what they do is important and how it relates to the overall success.
Yeah, yeah, and if you think about it, every job in a company is really important. I mean, even a janitor in a job, I hear a lot of people go, "Oh, they're just the janitor." Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to go to a restroom in a bad in a nasty bathroom, and I don't want to walk into my office every day where it's dirty. And over time, it just becomes dirty and dysfunctional. So that job is really essential. And to me, and the way that I think about my job on a day-to-day basis and how essential it is to me is it creates my mindset for the day.
Yeah, but most people don't connect the dots that easily. So you have to help them connect the dots and share with them all the information and keep talking about it. Oh, that's the last thing I want to say around this topic is this whole idea of this communication. You can't say something once or even twice or three times and go, oh man, I've said this a whole bunch already. Everyone's got it now. No,
But I
they
told
don't.
them.
Yeah, you got to tell them 21 times, I think is what studies show for them to really sink in. So you got to repeat it over and over and over again until you're blue in the face, which ties back to these one-on-ones. If you're meeting with them every week and you're talking about these things week after week after week, it'll start having an impact. You just can't say it once or twice and go, I did my job, they've got it. And why aren't they doing it now?
Yeah, I say that people have to be throwing up in the bathroom because you said it so many times. They're just sick of you saying it, right? So
Yeah, and then you
they're
need to keep going because then you're finally making it, it's finally sinking in. Yeah.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's usually when we stop because what ends up happening is people start mocking you, and
Yeah.
and you actually stop doing what gave you the edge that you have now. And I would tell you to keep on talking about it. Let them mock you. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
thinking about that and read some of the reading, like Herb Kelleher with Southwest, he was known for being very audacious and out there, and people would mock him all the time, but he didn't care because they remembered him. They remembered what he talked about, and he constantly talked about the culture and making sure the people were taken care of, making sure the customer was taken care of. And I think that that's the real important lesson. So.
yeah, if you think about a lot of the big successful companies out there, that those leaders are like that. And so we should, as smaller companies, emulate what they're doing because it works. It
Yeah.
absolutely works. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't cost any money to do that. It just takes your discipline and focus to keep telling people over and over and over again. And that's one of the main jobs of leaders you need to do that, is to communicate what the message is and remind them and motivate them. And what else should you be spending your time doing? That's part of the role.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and both of you can get involved in this, like micromanagement versus accountability. We hear about this a lot.
I
Yeah,
think when people complain about micromanagement, they're really wanting the leader out of the way completely, but the leader is just abdicating if that's happening. The leader's not there at all. That's different than delegation. If you delegate and then you follow up, that's leadership. What if you abdicate, because you're afraid that people are going to say you're micromanaging, then you don't really know what's going on, and nobody knows what's really important.
Yeah, and I also say there's a fine line there too, because I have to hold people accountable. I need to know what's going on. I'm making decisions with your piece of information as well as several other pieces of information. And if I don't have your information, I'm making a decision sort of with one eye closed. And I don't want to be making a decision with one eye closed.
yeah. So one of the things that leaders are, fearful of, go back to, the theme of fear, Ted, is they're fearful that they're going to upset their people by, trying to hold them accountable. And that's a false thing, because now, if there aren't clear expectations, then if they're trying to hold them accountable to something, it can go the wrong way, because there's not, people feel that it's not fair. But if everyone bought into what the expectations were, there's clear guidelines of what everyone's supposed to do. Now you're just holding them to the commitment that's already been made. And now that's real accountability, and without the fear, because, well, of course, I should ask you if you did what we already talked about. You said you were going to do. That's understood.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So I love that we're talking about this, and I love that we're talking about the accountability versus micromanagement. We hear this a lot, and it's really hard for leaders to understand because there's a fine line there. But micromanagement really, to me, is me telling somebody how to do something and standing over the top of them and directing them as they're doing it. Accountability is me getting information from you so that I understand what's going on in the larger picture of what's going on. And accountability is absolutely necessary. And as we know, the three of us know this, A players love accountability. C players don't like accountability.
Yeah, A players want to show off. What did they do? Because they've got an accomplishment. Every day they've got another new accomplishment, and they want to show what they did.
Yep. And C players, they don't want accountability because it's easier for them to hide. And they're the ones who are usually pushing back the most. And it really intimidates the leader that maybe they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, when really you should be doing more of what you're doing, because sometimes we believe somebody is good when they're not. I don't know how many retreats I've been in or I've started with companies, and somebody will tell me that this person is a C player. No, that's their A player. Once you start holding them accountable and having those accountability conversations, they come to life. And the C players seem to fall out along the wayside, and people you thought were A are really C, and people that you thought were C were really A's. So
Absolutely.
it's really interesting to watch this happen. So this is a Strategy Sherpa show. We're going to take another break. We'll be right back after these messages, and we'll wrap it up with another story from Ted.
Welcome back to the Strategy Sherpa Show with David Chavez. Have a question for David or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show.
Hey everyone, this is David Chavez. It's the Strategy Sherpa Show, and we are back. And I know normally I do this last part myself, but when I have my cohorts with me, we have so many stories to share. We can't stop sharing them. And so, Ted, on May the 8th, you and I together, Portland, Oregon, we're going to do the People Strategy Execution and Cash. We're going to do Scaling Up together in a live workshop. And if people are interested, they can go to assuredstrategy.com and learn all about it. And
Awesome.
just click on the events tab. So Ted.
Yeah. I want to tell another story about right people in the right seats.
Oh, yeah.
So working with a client, they've got a guy who's been in welding for a long time, and they promote him into leadership, and he becomes the welding supervisor. And the problem is he's causing all kinds of problems. I'm not going to get into the details to protect the guilty here, but he wasn't a great supervisor. But you know what he was great at? He was great at welding. So they put him back in welding. Now, he didn't feel very good about that, right? His ego was hurt because he thought that he could do more. He wanted to be paid more. He'd been there a long time. The culture was strong enough, though, that they didn't just throw him away. They didn't just say, well, just because, he's unhappy, there's something wrong here. They really looked and they said, well, maybe we should try again as a welding supervisor. And then they had a long conversation and they decided, no, we tried that before. We're not going to do that again. So they talked themselves out of a bad decision. That was great. And then they looked some more and they said, well, what else could he do? Maybe our minds are just too narrow here. So they opened their minds and they said, you know what? We need somebody to inspect our welding department. We have a quality department. We have a quality, not quality assurance, quality control. We have a quality control department. Why don't we have him be our quality inspector for welding? And so they made that change and he started to shine. He was making more money. He had a little bit more authority, at least perceived. His ego felt good because he was being perceived as somebody who has a lot of skill. And what was amazing was the way he was communicating with the welders got so much better because he wasn't their supervisor. He was helping them improve as quality control. I was really worried when they were doing it. I thought he would, have a power trip and maybe his ego would cause a problem, but it didn't turn out that way at all. It turned out that he was a massive positive contributor, and the welders are all getting better because they're having his input into that process.
I love it. I love these stories where, because out of all the stuff we deal with, this is probably the number one thing that just kicks our rear end. I know accountability comes up a lot with the CEOs, and they're frustrated by it, but there's people in jobs that just don't have the competency to do the job. At one time, maybe they did, but now they don't because the company's been scaling, or they just have been hurting the company because of their lack of knowledge and lack of willingness to learn. And here's an example of a guy who wanted to become a leader, wasn't a really good leader, but was a good teacher, right? And good at, and a very good welder for that matter, because he obviously knew what he was doing because they had trusted him enough to do the quality assurance part of it. Yes. And he could actually teach them. So very interesting.
Yeah, and the rest of the team really responded to him, and they are improving their performance too.
Yeah.
As you're telling that story, Ted, I'm thinking about this whole idea of if a team member is not being successful, the leaders need to really not look at that person to figure out what's wrong with them. They need to turn around and say, what am I not doing to make them successful? It's really on the leader. Now, of course, we talk about two main things to judge if someone's being successful. One is the productivity. Are they actually doing the job that they need to do? And then the other thing is, are they living the core values of the company? Are they a good culture fit? So if they really are a good culture fit and they're not producing, then there's something going on there. We need to do everything in our power to fix it. Either give them the support, the training, or in your case, Ted, move them to a role that's better suited for their skills and talents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good example. And I love it that it's not at a really high level, because a lot of these examples we share often are at really high levels. And this is on the line, right? This is the line employees and trying to become a supervisor and not working out, and still a valuable employee with a lot of years of quality experience. And the guy was obviously very good at what he did, but just couldn't be a leader, but is a good teacher. So
yeah, and it would have been a shame if you think, well, you have to just move up in a certain path. They would have lost him because it was not a good fit. And you don't want to lose a person like that. People that really are living your core values, that really believe what you believe, you want to keep them around as long as possible.
Well, and then knowing this company and knowing that their overarching promise to their customer is durability, those welds are very, very critical to the durability of their product. And if the welds are messed up, so they could have lost one of their most experienced people in one of the most critical elements to their customer, the durability, and they ended up keeping them and making them very happy in the process of doing it. So, and still making him successful at what he's doing. I love it. I love it. These are great examples because we don't want to throw away people like you said, Warren, that believe in what we believe in.
Yeah. So when we talk about growth and, leadership teams talk about want to grow, and a lot of people would think, oh, the company just wants to grow and make more money. But that's a lot of times not the case. A lot of times you want to grow because you need to create opportunities for your people to grow and have new positions. Yes. If you don't grow, then there wouldn't be that quality, assurance division for that person to work in, because you wouldn't even have it. You got to create growth for your people to grow.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I love this conversation just overall because we run into this quite a bit, and we probably all have several stories around this. I mean, there was a company that we convinced the CEO to step down because of more than once, because they just weren't good at the job anymore, and that they're still in the company doing great things and very happy. And it's just amazing when these things actually happen. It's sort of like Jeff in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We've actually lived this before. Yeah. I mean, and And it's just huge. It's funny to watch because don't, when you're reading it in a book and then you see it live and it happening live, and years later, the people are still all working together. It's really, really interesting how you can take somebody and put them in a position and make their life happy, and they'll stay happy at work too.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example also of our expectations that we always should have that next position. We should be that next level, and even all the way up to the CEO. And it's not necessary. And people can be happier in other places, but it's the right culture, and they want to stay, and they don't want to leave. So it's okay to put people in the right place, and they will work through whatever emotions they have to work through. Sometimes they do have to, they do have to work through something. It's not always easy, but you get to the result, and it's good for everybody.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And so today we've talked about fear. We've talked about getting the right people in the right spots. We've talked about cash and how important it is. And we're just, we're constantly learning about ourselves too. It's really interesting even with these clients learning, I'm still learning about myself. And guys, I wanted to thank you for coming on because Ted, I know it's really early. You're on Pacific time. It's early for you to join us. And Warren, you're on Central Time with me, so it's easy. But at the same time, I appreciate both of your times because I know that you're very busy with clients and all kinds of other things that we do. And I just want to thank you for coming in and sharing some of your wisdom today with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, don't forget on May 8th, Ted and I are doing a workshop in Portland, assuredstrategy.com events, and Warren is doing a webinar on April the 4th from 1 to 2 Central Time. So learn a little bit more about the cash he was talking about today. This is David Chavez. This is the Strategy Sherpa Show. Thank you for joining us.